Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Gravitas, co-presented by
SBI Mutual Fund, a partner for life.
Chemistry That Matters, Sabic. Skoda, superb, best in next class.
Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist.
Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has made quite a journey. He's the son of a coast guard. As a teenager, he's said to have sold lemonade to make money. He attended Islamic school, then got a management degree, played professional football, became the mayor of Istanbul, the Prime Minister of Turkey, and now the President. You may think he's come very far, but Erdogan is not done yet. He now wants to be the leader of the Muslim world, the Caliph. First, he tried to enter the European Union, but keeping up the facade of democracy was taxing. A failed coup in 2016 gave him the perfect excuse to demolish democratic institutions and the opposition. Now, with the country firmly in his control, Erdogan has embarked on his next mission, global power. So he's picking fights left, right and centre, stoking violence in a bid to position himself as the power broker. The world is doing very little to stop him. The EU summit last week failed to announce any sanctions on Turkey. The NATO still has Turkey as a member despite the threats it poses to the alliance. Some NATO members have frozen arms exports to Turkey. You've heard strong words too. But what's stopping the NATO from expelling Turkey? On Gravitas tonight, we shall discuss. Also on the show, China is the global capital of forced labour. A new report has revealing data on how many top brands sourced from China get products made by forced labourers and children. The world is practicing economic distancing from China and India is making the most of it. The government has announced a new $143 billion plan to make smartphones in India. A British school textbook links Hinduism with terrorism, says Hindus take up arms, which is why India has nuclear weapons. We'll tell you what happened next. And the New York Times has officially backed Joe Biden for president. Political endorsement by the press is a tradition in the US. Should the media tell you who to vote for? We will discuss. But first, as always, Gravitas Global Headlines.
Unfavorable views toward China have soared in the past year among advanced economies. US-based PEW Research Center conducted the survey of 14,276 adults in 14 countries, including Australia, Britain, Germany, Japan, South Korea, and the United States. 61% of respondents slammed China's response to the pandemic. 78% said they had little faith in Chinese President Xi Jinping. In a move which is likely to affect thousands of Indian IT professionals, the Trump administration will be making further restrictions to its H-1B visa program. The move aims to make it more expensive for American companies to hire workers from overseas. Authorities say they would also narrow the list of occupations the visa could be used for. Clashes erupted outside a Greek courthouse as the country's neo-Nazi party Golden Dawn was declared a criminal organization. A group of protesters lobbed petrol bombs and rocks at the police, while others welcomed the verdict. Leaders of the Golden Dawn Party have been found guilty of running a criminal group that targeted migrants and left-wing activists. A Golden Dawn sympathizer was also found guilty of killing 34-year-old leftist rapper Pavlos Fyssas. Earth experienced its hottest September on record in 2020. The European Union's Earth Observation Programme has made the alarming announcement. The surface of our planet was warmer last month than during any September on record. For the 12-month period through September, the temperature was nearly 1.3 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The global chemical watchdog has confirmed that Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny was the victim of an attack with a Soviet-era nerve agent. Germany and its allies have now called on Russia to fully investigate and explain how opposition leader Alexei Navalny was poisoned with a military-grade nerve agent. Berlin has warned Moscow that use of chemical weapons is unacceptable and will not go without a response. India and Japan have signed a memorandum of cooperation in cybersecurity. Union Minister Prakash Javadekar announced the key areas of partnership include critical information infrastructure, 5G technology, and artificial intelligence. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar met his Japanese counterpart for the 13th Japan Foreign Ministers' Strategic Dialogue. Scientists Emmanuelle Charpentier and Jennifer Doudna have won the 2020 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. The French-American duo won the Nobel for the development of a method for genome editing. Emmanuelle Charpentier and Jennifer Doudna have become the 6th and 7th women to win a Nobel for Chemistry, joining the likes of Marie Curie and Frances Arnold. The world's billionaires have grown their already huge fortunes to a record high of $10.2 trillion. A report by the Swiss bank UBS says that billionaires increased their wealth by more than a quarter at the height of the coronavirus crisis from April to July. A rally in stock prices and gains in technology and healthcare helped the wealth of the world's richest break the 10 trillion mark for the first time ever. 7th seed Petra Kvitova has booked her place in the French Open semi-final for the first time since 2012 with a win over German Laura Siegmund. Two-time Wimbledon champion Kvitova produced an assured display, hitting 22 winners and making just 15 unforced errors in the 6-3, 6-3 victory. The 30-year-old is yet to drop a set in the tournament and will face Australian Open champion Sofia Kenin in the last 4. The 4th seed overcame fellow American Danielle Collins 6-4, 4-6, 6-love to reach her first Roland Garros semi-final. The Los Angeles Lakers are just one win away from their first NBA championship in a decade after taking a 3-1 lead in the finals against Miami Heat. Led by their two star men, LeBron James and Anthony Davis, the Lakers won by 102 points to 96 in Game 4 of the best-of-7 series. Miami had kept themselves alive by winning the previous game, but they were outscored by the Lakers in all quarters except the second. LeBron James scored a game-high 28 points, while Davis ended with 22. The Lakers can now clinch the title when the series resumes on Friday.
Our cover story tonight is about a rogue nation that is a member of the world's most powerful military alliance, an alliance built to guard democratic values. I'm talking about Turkey and the NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. If you surf the NATO website, you'd find this page. It describes the political and military purpose of the NATO. Let me quote, "The NATO promotes democratic values. Its purpose is to guarantee freedom and security of its members." Does Turkey fit these criteria? It doesn't. Under President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Turkey has descended into authoritarianism. He used a failed military coup in 2016 to tighten his grip on power. There was a massive purge. Within the military, the courts and the education system, journalists were jailed in Turkey, assets of political opponents seized by the state, and dissent crushed. Erdogan has pushed Turkey into a new presidential system where he controls all levers of power. Now, with the country firmly in his grasp, Erdogan forged new alliances with countries like Russia and China, two more authoritarian states. The result is this: Turkey is the biggest liability for NATO. It doesn't represent the values of NATO. It has befriended the adversaries of NATO. And all of this has made Turkey an unreliable partner. So why doesn't NATO dump Erdogan's Turkey? That's our focus tonight on Gravitas. We'll tell you why Turkey no longer deserves to be part of such alliances. And for the sake of example, we are focusing on NATO. NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, has 30 members. It was created in 1949 in the aftermath of the Second World War. The purpose was to secure peace in Europe, especially against the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union fell, the relevance of NATO came into question. Today, the NATO says its allies are committed to democracy, individual liberty, and the rule of law. Turkey joined this alliance in 1952 because there was a synergy of interests. Turkey did not want to fall under the Soviet influence, and its military made key contributions. But that is no longer the case. Today, Erdogan is on a collision course with the same allies. It is fighting the allies of NATO too. Just look at what Turkey has been up to this year. In the month of January, Turkey violated a United Nations arms embargo in Libya. Turkish warships escorted a vessel suspected of smuggling weapons into Libya. By June, Turkey was locked in a direct face-off against Greece and France. Now, NATO's allies have sworn to protect each other. When one is in trouble, all members come to its rescue. But Turkey was ready to wage a war against Greece just to control oil and gas supplies. And now Turkey is fueling another conflict, the one in Nagorno-Karabakh. Turkey is arming Azerbaijan against Armenia. The NATO called for a ceasefire, but Turkey refuses to pay heed to such calls.
It is extremely important that we convey a very clear message to all parties involved that they should cease fighting immediately, that we should support all efforts to find a peaceful, negotiated solution, because there is no military solution to the situation in and around Nagorno-Karabakh. And this has been a very clear message from me ever since the fighting started, because it is dangerous for all those people involved, but it's of course also something which is of great concern for the whole region and for all NATO allies.
Turkey wants to dictate the terms. It says the NATO should first ask Armenia to withdraw.
Both countries are partners of NATO. Therefore, it is normal that NATO calls for a balanced ceasefire and a peaceful solution, but everyone, namely NATO, should call for the resolution of this problem under international laws, that is, UN resolutions and Azerbaijan's territorial integrity, Armenia immediately withdrawing from this region.
The conflict began 11 days ago and it is getting closer to a full-scale war. Yesterday we told you how Turkey is sending Syrian fighters to fight for Azerbaijan. Turkey has dug its heels. Its relationship with many NATO allies has frayed. So we come back to the question, why should Turkey remain in this military alliance? NATO has many reasons to expel Turkey. In 2019, Turkey bought the Russian S-400 missile defense system despite vehement objections of the United States and other NATO members. Why was the NATO concerned about this weapons deal? Because it is unlikely that Russian weaponry will integrate into NATO's air defenses. The fissures between Turkey and its allies are getting wider. NATO is an alliance that operates on consensus. All members must be on the same page. If Turkey remains at odds, it can stall any policy change, veto any military move, and undermine the policy of collective defense. In fact, it's already doing this. Turkey has blocked NATO partnerships with Israel, Armenia, Egypt, and the UAE. For the longest time, it blocked a plan for the defense of Poland and the Baltic nations, countries that share a border with Russia. Reports say Erdogan relented only after considerable pressure from the US. And this is not just about NATO. Having Turkey on such a major military alliance poses a threat for everyone. Erdogan is triggering conflicts and threatening peace. An alliance that vows to uphold democratic values and peace must hold its members accountable or dump them. As for Turkey, its proxy wars are growing in number. Turkey has supplied materials and fighters to Libya to change the course of the civil war. Erdogan provoked Greece in the eastern Mediterranean. They were on the brink of a war. The Turkish president intervened in Syria too, and now Turkey is instigating Azerbaijan, pushing for a full-blown war in Nagorno-Karabakh. Our next report tells you about Erdogan's many wars for world power.
Armed and reckless, that's modern-day Turkey for you. The Turkish president is playing a dangerous war game. He is pushing Turkish arms, the military and proxies, to volatile regional battlegrounds. It began with Libya. In January, Turkey announced a military intervention in the civil war. Erdogan is a key supporter to the Tripoli-based government of national accord that is fighting the Libyan National Army, led by Commander Khalifa Haftar. Last year, in April, the Libyan National Army launched an offensive to seize the capital. Turkey has deployed its military forces, sent Syrian militants, even armed the government of national accord despite a UN embargo. French President Emmanuel Macron has accused Turkey of meddling in the Libyan conflict. In Macron's eyes, Turkey has threatened European interests with its military deployments.
I have already had the opportunity to make this very clear to President Erdogan. I now consider that Turkey is playing a dangerous game in Libya and is in breach of all the commitments it made at the Berlin conference. This is the same speech I made this afternoon during the exchange I had with President Trump. Because it is in the interest of Libya, of its neighbors, of the whole region, but also of Europe.
How did Erdogan respond to Macron? By promising him more troubles in the future. It wasn't a hollow threat. In August, Turkey pursued an aggressive gas exploration effort in the eastern Mediterranean. Greece stakes claim to the same disputed regions. Encounters between Turkish and Greek vessels on the high seas raised the threat of war. France sided with Greece. At the height of the tensions, Erdogan has this message for Macron.
France is often on the agenda. I don't want to give names, but I'm forced to, because he comes at me a lot. It isn't with our people, but he says, we have a problem with Erdogan. Mr. Macron, you are going to have way more problems with me.
The Turkish president hasn't backed down. By the end of September, Erdogan triggered a new conflict. He ramped up support to Azerbaijan. On the 27th of September, fighting broke out in Nagorno-Karabakh, a disputed region at the crossroads of Asia and Europe. For 11 days now, Armenia and Azerbaijan have been engaged in deadly clashes. With Erdogan sending Syrian mercenaries to assist Azerbaijan, the international community wants a ceasefire. Erdogan has offered Azerbaijan complete military support and defied calls for a ceasefire.
Given that the three Minsk countries, United States, Russia and France, have neglected this problem for nearly 30 years, first of all, it is unacceptable that they are involved in a search for a ceasefire in the face of these negative developments that came to surface in these days. But if something is wanted, the invaders should leave these lands in order to achieve a solution.
Turkey is waging proxy battles for power. Erdogan believes that he can get a seat at the high table with gunboat diplomacy. But by flexing his military muscle, the Turkish president is only isolating his country further. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
For the longest time in recent history, Turkey tried to maintain a facade, showcase itself as a peace-loving, secular country. That's because Turkey wanted to be part of the European Union. That dream has faded, as has Turkey's facade. Some history first. Turkey applied for EEC, the European Economic Community membership, in 1959. The application was accepted. In 1989, Turkey applied for a full membership of the European Union, or the EU. But Europe was not comfortable with the idea of letting Turkey in. They said Turkey is a very populous country. It also has a Muslim majority. They called it a Muslim country, despite Turkey calling itself secular. Turkey also had disputes over Cyprus. These factors were too big, apparently, for Europe to ignore. In 2007, France and Germany blocked all negotiation about Turkey's EU membership. That's because Turkey refused to admit its role in the Armenian genocide. But the big fall came in the year 2016, the failed military coup, Erdogan's crackdown. Democracy suffered in Turkey. Human rights record worsened. Now the European Union says Turkey's membership bid is evaporating. The question is Turkey still interested? Or is it chasing a new goal? World domination, perhaps. In the last 15 years, Turkey has been dreaming a new dream. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the current president of Turkey, came to power in the year 2003. He was the prime minister then. And he wanted to become the caliph, the ruler of the Muslim world. So on paper, Erdogan maintained that joining the EU was Turkey's strategic goal. But in practice, he was taking his country in another direction. He was looking east, towards the Arab world. Turkey was building a case against its own EU membership. Turkey refused to recognize the Republic of Cyprus. In 2013, Turkish police cracked down on protesters. In 2014 and 2016, the government launched a purge. Erdogan became more and more authoritarian. He wanted Turkey to be a muscle power Muslim state, not a secular, democratic European nation. It was a more comfortable arrangement. It did not require Turkey to wear the facade of democracy. So Turkey started dwelling on its Ottoman history, justifying its posturing in West Asia. Its intervention in Syria and Iraq. Erdogan became unapologetically authoritarian. He was granting refuge to Muslim Brotherhood activists from Egypt. One thing is clear. Turkey's present goal does not include peace or Brussels. It involves unseating Saudi Arabia as the leader of the Muslim world. Saudi Arabia is the guardian of the Muslim holy places of Mecca and Medina. Turkey cannot have those sites, but it wants to project itself as a country that is not too obsessed with the Shia-Sunni divide. The murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi gave Erdogan the opportunity to slam Saudi Arabia, and he embraced it. He also uses Pakistan as a tool against Saudi dominance. And he buys Pakistan's loyalty with anti-India statements on Kashmir. Turkey's location was an opportunity. It could have been the bridge between the Muslim and the secular world, but its president chose to be the wedge. His priority was to convert Istanbul's Hagia Sophia Mosque into a museum. He's going all out to please the Muslim world. Turkey's army is one of the most powerful in the NATO. He's using it to fuel the fight between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Why is he doing this? Because Azerbaijan is a Muslim country, plus it has oil. Erdogan's dreams of a caliphate do not acknowledge boundaries and contradictions. So he attacks the ISIS, then he does business with it. He fights the Muslim Brotherhood, but also commits crimes against the Kurds. He occupies parts of Syria, but contests Israeli occupation of the West Bank. He remains a member of the NATO, but fights NATO forces in the Mediterranean. Erdogan's Islamic power play has brought Turkey to a crossroads. This country today stands between democracy and dictatorship, the West and West Asia. And all of this is to fuel one man's desire for power. one man's desire for global power. It also reminds us of China, led by a man who wants his country to be the center of the world. China has long been known as the global workshop. Since it became the virus exporter, business started moving away, and now shocking details are emerging from China. A US report calls China a hotspot for forced labor. 83 foreign and Chinese companies apparently benefited from this. Here are the details.
Happy and prosperous. That's what you'll think about the ethnic minorities in Xinjiang if you'll believe the Chinese propaganda. This video has been shared by the Chinese ambassador to Belgium. He says the minorities in Xinjiang are happy and carefree. Social media wasted no time in correcting him. Here is the other side of Xinjiang that China hasn't shared. This report came out in August. It narrates the tale of how Uyghur Muslims are pushed into forced labor. As the global demand for personal protection equipment or PPE shot up, Uyghurs were sent to work in at least 17 companies against their will. China describes it as lifting the poor out of poverty. But a new report by the US Labor Department blows the lid of China's slavery program. China tops the list of countries that are exporting products made with forced labor. Reports say origins of at least 17 goods can be traced back to forced and child labor. This includes artificial flowers, Christmas decorations, coal, fish, footwear, gloves, hair products, and more. Forced labor now taints several industries in China. According to the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, as many as 83 foreign and Chinese companies benefited from China's forced labor transfer program. The list includes names of famous brands like Apple, BMW, Gap, Huawei, Nike, Samsung, Sony, and Volkswagen. Major powers are now questioning China's detention centers in Xinjiang. Beijing has tried to evade the scrutiny by denying their existence.
So-called detention camps have never existed in Xinjiang. We have repeatedly responded to various China-related reports fabricated by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute.
On the very day that Beijing issued the statement, this report came out. It says that China is now building bigger detention centers in Xinjiang. The report goes on to describe one such facility. It is spread across 60 acres. There are 13 five-story residential buildings. The entire detention camp is surrounded by high walls. Allegedly, it can accommodate more than 10,000 people. Forced labor is part of a broad Chinese government campaign of repression against the minorities. China denies all charges, but the evidence is clear. After the outbreak of the Wuhan virus, several companies are thinking of moving their factories away from China. It is only prudent that big businesses take note of the forced labor campaign and cut off their ties with the mainland. Otherwise, they'll be guilty of extending tacit support to a modern slavery campaign. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And the Great China decoupling is truly underway, with India slowly emerging as a viable alternative. New Delhi has given its nod to partners of Apple and Samsung to set up their smartphone manufacturing in India. Our next report tells you more about India's bid to become a global hub for smartphones.
India wants to become a smartphone production hub. As many as 16 global companies are ready to set up a base in India. The Indian government has promised these firms incentives worth well over $6 billion. The biggest beneficiaries could be Samsung and Apple. The South Korean electronics giant has won a place in the government's incentive program. 3 contract manufacturing partners of Apple are also on the list. India wants to become the next smartphone manufacturing hub. And it has set some ambitious targets. India wants smartphone makers to produce phones and components worth more than $143 billion over the next 5 years. According to a report, 60% of the products made locally will be exported. The incentives will generate 2 lakh direct and 6 lakh indirect jobs. India wants to leverage the anti-China sentiment in the global markets. Since the outbreak of the Wuhan virus, decoupling from China has become the new buzzword. Major companies have announced plans to move out of China. Samsung has shut down its mobile phone production in China. The company has expanded production in India and Vietnam. Hasbro began shifting its manufacturing last year. Toy maker wants to have only 50% of its products to come from China by the end of this year. Apple's supplier Foxconn is leaving China too. Reports say the company plans to invest $1 billion to expand its factory in Chennai. Electronics company Nintendo and tech company GoPro wants to leave China too. And India has positioned itself to leverage this great China exit. In an effort to attract smartphone makers, New Delhi came up with an incentive scheme. These companies have been given a 6% financial incentive on additional sales of goods for the next 5 years. This is likely to be offered as a tax rebate. But India faces an uphill battle. Chinese smartphone makers dominate the Indian market. According to one report, these companies command an 80% market share in India alone. India must break this Chinese monopoly, abroad as well as at home. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
A textbook in the UK has attacked Hinduism and India. The book claims that Hindus turn to terrorism to defend faith. And listen to this. Apparently, Hinduism justifies self-defense, and that is the reason why India has nuclear weapons. If this sounds too much, wait till you watch this report.
Terror is an understatement when describing British colonialism. The Bengal famine, year 1943. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill starved 4 million Indians to death. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre, year 1919. Over 1,000 Indians were killed in cold blood by one British general, Reginald Dyer. The Mau Mau uprising, years 1951 to 1960. Kenyans were raped and tortured in concentration camps. At least 100,000 of them are estimated to have died. If these aren't instances of terror, what are they? Don't ask British students this question. They will not be able to answer. Because their textbooks do not get the meaning of terror. How else do you explain one British school book linking Hinduism to terrorism? A book on religious studies claims that Hinduism justifies self-defense. How? It says Hindus will take up arms, and that's the reason why India has nuclear weapons. Well, why does the UK then have nuclear weapons? Last we checked, it was not governed by Hindu laws. And just for your information, neither is secular India. Honestly, we cannot make up our mind about what's weirder, linking Hinduism to terrorism or linking Hindu scriptures to India's nuclear arsenal. This is just one of the many things wrong with the British education system. It is misleading, myopic, and custom-made to glorify Britons vis-a-vis others. Did you know that British schools exclude British colonialism from their syllabus? School students are not taught about the terror called the British Raj. The textbooks go on and on about the Nazi concentration camps, the American Civil War, Victorian England, episodes like the Plague, the Great Fire of London. But what about the British East India Company, the Boer War, the Jallianwala Bagh, the Bengal famine? These are things too uncomfortable to discuss. Instead, it's easier to whitewash history and keep an entire country in the dark. 32% of Britons are proud of their former empire. 33% think British colonies were better off colonized. 27% of them wish Britain still had its empire. What is this rose-tinted view of the past? Someone please send the Britons back to school and make sure it's outside the UK. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Just 27 days left for the US presidential election, and as we speak, America is preparing for the upcoming vice presidential debate, the big face-off between Vice President Mike Pence and Democratic vice presidential pick Kamala Harris. Both are experienced speakers. Pence is a former radio and television host, Kamala Harris, a former attorney general. Both of them have a reputation for not mincing their words. And now with the two presidential debates at stake, the face-off between Harris and Pence may be all that the Americans will get this election season. The vice presidential debate will be held in the Salt Lake City. It will be at 6:30 a.m. IST and WION will be broadcasting live. What can you expect from the vice presidential debate? Before the first presidential debate, we told you all about the different segments and time limit, but we also saw how all of those rules collapsed like a pack of cards. So tonight, we'll discount the rule book and instead tell you what Kamala Harris and Mike Pence are likely to talk about, what will be on their agenda and their respective parties' agenda. Health, of course, will dominate. And there are two reasons why I say this. First, the US President, Donald Trump, testing positive for the Wuhan virus. And second, the White House task force on the Wuhan virus. Mike Pence is leading this team. So it's only fair to expect that Kamala Harris's team will load her with numbers to throw at Pence and question the Trump administration's response to the Wuhan virus. Racism and racial justice are also likely to feature in this debate. Also making a stage debut will be a plexiglass barrier to ensure social distancing. Will Kamala Harris carry forward Joe Biden's question on white supremacy? We'll have to wait a few hours to have an answer to this question. But here's another one. What do you think is happening inside the White House or Trump's inner circle? As many as 17 top officials have tested positive for the Wuhan virus, 17. Top Trump aide Stephen Miller is the latest. The number is going up fast. Who was the super spreader? The White House has chosen to not put out any official figures. The U.S. Capitol, Washington, D.C., which is also home to the White House, has recorded the highest number of daily coronavirus cases in more than 4 months. The city has reported 105 new cases on Monday alone. Now, experts say the rising number is to do with the outbreak at the White House. Donald Trump came back to the presidential mansion yesterday and he took off the mask. The first thing, what was he thinking? Another question. What was Trump thinking when he tweeted calling off talks on a stimulus package? Look at the tweet. This is what Trump wrote, and I quote, "I have instructed my representatives to stop negotiating until after the election, when immediately after I win, we will pass a major stimulus bill that focuses on hardworking Americans and small businesses." The president has received quite a lot of flack for saying what he did. Joe Biden said Trump was turning his back on Americans. And now it looks like Trump is rethinking. He's sending mixed signals on Twitter about the stimulus. Has he realized that not signing a stimulus or not helping Americans who desperately need help may cost him votes? A Reuters Ipsos poll claims that Joe Biden is leading Trump in national polls. And this is with an advantage of as much as 12 percentage points. I will not comment on opinion polls. They tend to get it wrong more often than not. But here's something we must dwell on. Major publications in the United States picking sides, from the Washington Post to the New York Times, they've all come out to endorse Joe Biden. Should the media take sides in an election? We'll discuss this in the next report. But before that, here's something you should consider. Whoever said that everything is fair in love and war forgot the US election. We are talking about a country where the president loves accusing the very electoral system that elected him to the White House. And we are talking about a country where the president loves to press the charge of fake news on the press. Here's an example that's just 2 hours old. Donald Trump has been tweeting restlessly all day. You see, US elections can get really messy. And this year, the mess is touching new heights. Now to the story that we promised. The American press not only reporting on the election, also cheerleading some candidates. The New York Times has endorsed Joe Biden, as has the Washington Post. American publications have for long been endorsing presidential candidates. But should the media tell you who to vote for? What impact do these newspaper endorsements have on the voter? Our next report examines.
These might sound like lines from Joe Biden's election campaign material, but they are not. Did someone from his team make these statements? No. This is what an editorial in a leading publication in the United States has said about the Democratic presidential contender. The New York Times editorial board has endorsed Joe Biden for the US presidency. The editorial piece says, Mr. Biden knows that there are no easy answers. He has the experience, temperament, and character to guide the nation through this valley into a brighter, more hopeful future. He has our endorsement for the presidency. What is the New York Times editorial board? It introduces itself as a group of opinion journalists whose views are informed by expertise, research, debate, and certain long-standing values. It is separate from the newsroom. In other words, a group of journalists openly declaring support for an election candidate. But since when did journalists tell you who to vote for? In the United States, all the time. This is a tradition. The New York Times has been endorsing presidential candidates since 1860. And it's not alone. Newspapers across the United States have followed this tradition. Newspaper endorsements are specific statements of support for a political candidate. Through the endorsements, newspapers say they aim to educate the masses. What about the press being unbiased and non-partisan? American media remains divided on the question. Earlier this year, America's NBC News said the practice of presidential endorsement by publications must end. The practice is not limited to just the United States. In Canada, 23 newspapers followed the liberal free press tradition of endorsing a candidate for Prime Minister in the 2015 federal election. In the election in 2011, 22 dailies did the same. In the UK too, editorials in the national newspapers tend to make their loyalties known ahead of the election. Does this impact the choice of a voter? According to a 2008 study by the Pew Research Center, almost 7 in 10 Americans said their local newspaper's endorsement had no impact on who they vote for. And with the oversaturation of social media and polarized media activity, people are probably placing lesser trust in the mainstream media. In 2016 US presidential election, it was noted that Hillary Clinton had more than 200 endorsements from daily and weekly newspapers in the United States. Trump had only 6 endorsements, and yet he won. In India, the biases are clear, but formal endorsements are not the practice. So, should the media tell you who to vote for? We let you decide. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Most of us celebrate our birthday by cutting a cake. But for Vladimir Putin, cake cutting may be passé. The Russian president turned 68 today, and he marked the day not with a cake, but with a hypersonic cruise missile. Here's a report.
A hypersonic missile launch. That's how Vladimir Putin celebrated his birthday. A power-packed 68th, quite literally.
Arming our military or fleet with the newest weapon systems that have no counterparts will surely ensure the defense capabilities of our country in the long term.
Amid tensions over arms control between Russia and the US, the successful testing of the Zircon may give Putin an upper hand. But Russians aren't in the mood for a birthday gift to the president. Putin's ratings remain at an all-time low, the lowest in 2 decades. although high by Western standards. Despite the alleged poisoning of Alexei Navalny and an economic downturn following the pandemic, Putin continues to dominate Russian politics. Critics call him a megalomaniac, one who made constitutional changes to become president for life. At least 16 more years on paper. He'd be 84 by then. And the president doesn't like his age to show. Putin projects a tough image. He wants you to see him taming tigers and conquering freezing waters. From judo and karate to skiing, diving and even car racing. There's barely a sport that the president hasn't shown his skills in. The former KGB spy was a political novice when Boris Yeltsin named him as an acting president in 1999. 2 decades later, and Putin is now the subject of a cult. On t-shirts, mugs, clocks and calendars. Russia's hero and top stuntsman. Flying into Chechnya in a fighter jet and joining the Russian bikers gang. He even appeared on the mosaic walls of a military church, but soon opted out after the news prompted a storm of criticism. At 68, Vladimir Putin shows no signs of slowing down or ceding any ground to opposition, both at home and abroad. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
68th birthday, here's something he can try his hand on. Longboard dancing. It has taken social media by storm. Although it is still regarded as a less popular version of skateboarding, longboarding in the last decade has been ruling the roost on social media. But the COVID-19 pandemic has brought everything to a standstill. What about longboard surfers? Here's a report.
The 1950s in the United States, but it is on the streets of Paris that it has become a rage. For decades, longboarding lived as an underground sport, more a shadow of skateboarding, which was considered to be more exciting. But by the late 90s, with advancements in wheel technology, longboards became more stable. And this made the sport safer and more accessible. So much so that from 2013, a longboard dancing world championship has been held each year.
Longboard dancing has this aesthetic appeal with the flying aspect. It's something very visual. It's very easy to create something beautiful by playing with your surroundings and so on. I think that's what I like about it. Just by looking at Instagram reels, you can tell how popular it's becoming because there's more and more longboard dancing. People love watching this kind of sport.
This year, the COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted every sporting calendar. Longboard dancers, who till last year could put forth their performances, were suddenly out of business. All shows were cancelled, and competitions either postponed indefinitely or held behind closed doors with little to no audience. It is here that social media has come to the rescue of most longboarders. Posting videos of their performances on Instagram has made longboarding dancers hugely popular.
If it wasn't for the social networks, I don't think we'd be doing this. They played a huge role in the growth and promotion of a sport that is still very much underground in 2020.
Social media stardom has brought in sponsorship. Longboard performers feel this is recognition that was long overdue.
There are quite a few headhunters on Instagram. I was contacted by an agency and was invited along to some castings. I'm still with that agency now, and I have been involved in a lot of advertising campaigns thanks to Instagram.
The COVID-19 pandemic has turned the world on its head. Longboarders who had till now been fighting for recognition suddenly find themselves in the spotlight. It is newfound fame, which has taken even the most optimistic of longboarders by surprise. But there is still a long way to go before longboarding becomes a mainstream sport. Bureau Report, WION. World is one.
With that, it's a wrap. Thanks very much for watching, but don't go away. Our special show, US Election Dialogues, coming up right ahead.
Gravitas, co-presented by
SBI Mutual Fund, a partner for life.
Chemistry that matters.